this comes out of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And I mean, he treats many different kinds of friendship. Civic friendship is one of them. And basically what he's arguing is that concord or some kind of sense of friendliness is necessary if you're going to have a political community. It's very hard to have one without that being there. And it's interesting because he says, there are limits. He put it at about 99,000 people in a political community. He's like, above that, I don't really see that you could have this kind of civic friendship. So Danielle Allen in her work, she's a political philosopher, and she has a book called Talking to Strangers, where she draws very extensively on this notion of civic friendship and on Aristotle's conception of it. And so at the end of the book, what she does to kind of make it real, at the time she was in Chicago, and she says, okay, where would be, kind of the boundaries of the 99,000, like, and starts in her neighborhood and kind of goes out in concentric circles. And I think we could all do something like that, right? So it might be hard to conceive of everyone in the US as a civic friend, but you might start where you are and go, depending on how densely populated, I don't know, within a 3-mile radius, a 5-mile radius, who's there? How do I relate to these people? The reason I think this idea of friendship is an important metaphor for how we think about citizenship is when I think back to the foundational question of solidarity within social solidarity in sociology. This is one of the big questions, especially with the Industrial Revolution and urban migration. The big question was, how do we have any sense of social solidarity? How does this work? And there are many metaphors that are given, right? You've got organic versus mechanical solidarity, right? So you have kind of this mechanistic picture, and then you've got this organ type one that's more like a body. More contemporary work, you've got Putnam's social capital, bridging and bonding social capital, which brings in this kind of economistic, picture. So it's interesting how we create these various metaphors for thinking about what is it that binds us together. Friendship used to be the dominant metaphor, and then it dropped out of favor in modernity. And I am arguing, that we need it back because what friendship does is, I think part of the problem is that the English language doesn't have as complex an understanding of it as the Greek language does. And so for us, it's like, well, I have Facebook friends and I have, friends I go to the movie with, right? So the idea of civic friendship is a different category of friendship, but it's still a form of friendship. And when I think of that, like a friend, even a civic friend, you're thinking of a person, an embodied person, a relationship. That's very different than if you're thinking about how do I build my social capital, right? Those are two fundamentally different kinds of relationships. I also think of Martin Luther King Jr. Would talk about when he was working with people in the civil rights movement. He would say, and under incredibly hostile circumstances, well, we're not thinking of these folks as enemies. We are thinking about how to transform enemies into friends. And he did draw explicitly on Greek thought when he was talking about that. So in other words, I think that it's quite conceivable to think in terms of civic friendship during incredibly hostile times. It doesn't get much more hostile than fire hoses and, vicious dogs being set on you and, just all the horrors of what was going on in the 50s and the 60s. And yet King was able to speak in these terms of friendship. And he didn't mean, a facile notion of friendship. He's talking about this deeper kind of civic friendship.